The October wind carried the scent of rain and dying leaves as I pulled into Emily's new neighborhood. Maple trees lined the sidewalks like sentries, their branches heavy with amber and crimson. I'd driven this route twice before, practicing, wanting to make sure I wouldn't be late for this invitation. The first time Emily had asked me over since she'd moved out 6 months ago. Her house sat nestled between two modest colonials, a pale yellow Victorian with white trim that reminded me painfully of the home Laura and I had dreamed of buying before everything changed. I sat in my Honda for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled, and wondered why my chest felt so tight. This should be a good day. My daughter was building a life. I should be proud, not anxious. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The front door opened before I could knock. Emily appeared, flour dusting her dark hair, Laura's hair, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Dad, you made it!" She hugged me, and for a moment I caught her familiar scent, vanilla perfume and something else. Something I couldn't place. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," I said, meaning it. "This place looks wonderful, Em." She led me through rooms that smelled of fresh paint and possibility. The hardwood floors gleamed and afternoon light streamed through windows she'd hung with sheer curtains. Everything was tasteful, coordinated, more sophisticated than I'd expected from someone her age. "Daniel's just finishing up some work in the basement," she said, bustling toward the kitchen. "He'll be up in a minute. Coffee?" I nodded, watching her move with practiced ease around her new space. "You've really made this place your own. Must have cost a fortune to furnish it so nicely." Her hand paused on the coffee maker. "Oh, bit by bit. Some things I found at estate sales, others I saved up for." She glanced away. "Daniel has a good eye for antiques." Footsteps thundered up what I assumed were basement stairs, and Daniel Reed appeared, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of easy smile that probably served him well in his renovation business. His handshake was firm, his eye contact steady. "Mr. Carter, Emily's told me so much about you. Hope you don't mind the sawdust. I was installing some shelving down there." "Not at all. House projects never end, do they?" He laughed, but something in the way his gaze shifted to Emily seemed calculated. "That's the truth. Good thing I enjoy the work." Emily poured coffee into mugs that looked expensive, cream-colored ceramic with delicate gold rims. As she handed me mine, I caught her exchange a quick look with Daniel. Nothing obvious, just a flutter of communication that made me feel like an outsider in their carefully constructed world. "So," I said, settling into a chair at their dining table, "tell me about this place. Emily mentioned you two found it together?" Daniel's smile never wavered. "Right place, right time. Sometimes the universe just aligns, I nodded, though something about his answer felt rehearsed. But I pushed the feeling aside. This was Emily's moment, Emily's happiness. I was here to celebrate, not interrogate. Still, as conversation flowed around the table, I couldn't shake the sense that I was watching a performance, and that both my daughter and her fiancé were playing roles I didn't quite understand. "I'll just grab some cream from the kitchen," I said, rising from the dining table as Emily and Daniel discussed wedding venues. Their voices faded to a pleasant murmur as I stepped into the adjoining kitchen, grateful for a moment alone to collect my thoughts. The kitchen was Emily's pride. White cabinets, granite countertops, and a farmhouse sink that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. She'd always loved cooking, just like Laura. I found myself smiling at the herb garden she'd started on the windowsill: basil, rosemary, thyme. Laura would have approved. I opened the refrigerator, reaching for the cream, when something caught my eye. A small glint of gold near the bread box, barely visible behind a ceramic canister. Probably a coin or a piece of Emily's jewelry, but something about it made me pause. I moved closer, and my breath caught in my throat. There, sitting casually beside a stack of takeout menus, was a wedding ring. Not just any wedding ring, a delicate band of white gold with a small diamond flanked by two tiny emeralds. My hands began to shake as I picked it up, turning it toward the light. The engraving inside made my knees weak. Forever yours, M. Laura's wedding ring. The one that had vanished 3 days after her funeral when I'd been too grief-stricken to think clearly about valuables or security. I'd torn the house apart looking for it, convinced it had somehow fallen behind furniture or rolled under the bed. The police had suggested it might have been taken during the viewing when so many people had come through our home with casseroles and condolences. I'd never seen it again, until now. My mind raced, trying to construct some innocent explanation. Maybe Emily had found it somehow. Maybe it had been in Laura's jewelry box all along, and I'd simply missed it in my fog of grief. Maybe she'd been keeping it safe, waiting for the right moment to return it. But then why was it sitting so casually on her kitchen counter? Why hadn't she mentioned it when I arrived? Why hadn't she said anything about it at all? "Dad, everything okay in there?" Emily's voice from the dining room made me jump. I quickly slipped the ring into my jacket pocket, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Just looking for cream," I called back, grabbing the carton with trembling fingers. I stood there for another moment, trying to steady my breathing. The ring felt impossibly heavy in my pocket, like it was burning through the fabric. 10 years. 10 years of wondering, of guilt, of feeling like I'd somehow failed to protect even Laura's memory. And now, here it was, in my daughter's kitchen, as if it had always belonged there. As I walked back to the dining room, forcing my face into a smile, one question echoed in my mind. How did Emily get her mother's wedding ring, and why hadn't she told me she had it? "You have to stay for dinner," Emily insisted as I returned to the dining room, the ring burning like a coal in my pocket. "You remember that recipe?" "She found it in one of her old cookbooks. Daniel helped me track down the right wine." He squeezed her hand across the table. He's very thorough about details. Daniel's smile was modest, practiced. "I just like to get things right. Your wife had excellent taste, Mr. Carter." Had excellent taste. As if he'd known her personally. I studied his face, searching for some flicker of recognition, but found only polite interest. "Did you know Laura? Before she passed, I mean?" "Oh no, sir. Just what Emily's told me about her. She sounds like she was an amazing woman." The conversation felt scripted somehow, too smooth. I forced myself to nod and smile while my mind churned. The ring seemed to pulse against my ribs with each heartbeat. I stood objectively, bringing plates to the kitchen. Daniel had excused himself to take a phone call, leaving us momentarily alone. "Let me help you with the dishes," I offered as Emily began stacking plates in the kitchen. "You don't have to do that, Dad. You're a guest." "Nonsense. Your mother always said many hands make light work." The words slipped out before I could stop them, and Emily's face softened with memory. "She did say that, didn't she?" Emily smiled, handing me a dish towel. I miss her voice sometimes, the way she hummed while she cooked. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As we worked side by side, I found myself studying Emily's kitchen with new eyes. The utensils in the drawer looked familiar, not just similar, but actually familiar. The wooden salad spoons with the slight crack in the handle, the silver serving fork with the worn monogram. These weren't just similar to items Laura and I had owned, they were the exact same pieces. My throat tightened. After Laura died, I'd packed away most of her kitchen things, unable to bear using them. They'd been stored in boxes in the basement for years. How had they ended up here? "Emily," I said carefully, lifting the serving fork, "this looks just like one your mother had." She glanced over, her hands stilling in the soapy water. Oh, that old thing. I think you gave it to me when I moved out. Don't you remember? I didn't remember. In fact, I was certain I'd never given away Laura's kitchen items. But before I could respond, Emily had turned back to the sink, scrubbing a pot with unnecessary vigor. While she was distracted, I opened a drawer near the window, looking for more evidence. Inside, beneath a stack of dish towels, I found a small picture frame lying face down. My hands trembled as I lifted it. It was a photo of Laura in our garden, probably taken about a year before she died. She was kneeling beside her rose bushes, her face glowing with the satisfaction of a job well done. I remembered taking this picture. It had sat on our mantel for months after her death before I'd finally packed it away, too painful to look at daily. Finding everything okay? I spun around to find Daniel standing in the doorway, his phone call apparently finished. His eyes were fixed on the frame in my hands, and for just a moment, his genial mask slipped. I caught something cold and calculating in his expression before the smile returned. "Just admiring this beautiful photo of Laura," I said, setting the frame carefully back in the drawer. "Emily has such lovely keepsakes." "She treasures family memories," Daniel replied smoothly. "We both believe in honoring the past." But there was something in the way he said "we" that made my skin crawl, as if he had some claim to Laura's memory, some right to these intimate family artifacts that had somehow found their way into his and Emily's home. "Dad, everything all right?" Emily appeared at Daniel's shoulder, her face creased with concern. "Perfect," I lied, forcing a smile. But nothing about this felt perfect. Nothing felt right at all. I couldn't sleep that night. The ring sat on my nightstand like an accusation, catching moonlight from the bedroom window. By dawn, I'd made my decision. If anyone would remember Laura's jewelry clearly, it would be Helen. My sister lived in a tidy ranch house 20 minutes across town, surrounded by the kind of flower garden Laura had always envied. Helen answered the door in her robe, coffee mug in hand, her gray hair still tousled from sleep. "Michael, it's barely 7:30. What's wrong?" Without a word, I held out the ring. Helen's coffee mug slipped from her fingers, shattering on the porch steps. Coffee splashed across her slippers, but she didn't seem to notice. Her eyes were fixed on the ring, wide with recognition, and something that looked like fear. "Oh my God, where did you find it?" "Emily's house, on her kitchen counter." Helen grabbed my arm, pulling me inside. "Tell me everything, right now." I recounted the previous evening, the expensive furnishings, the evasive answers about money, the familiar kitchen utensils, the hidden photograph. Helen listened without interrupting, her face growing more troubled with each detail. "I knew something was wrong when that ring disappeared, remember? I kept asking you if you'd checked with the funeral home, if maybe someone had taken it during the viewing." I remembered. Helen had been like a dog with a bone about it, suggesting we file a police report, insisting that rings don't just vanish. I'd been too wrapped up in grief to pursue it. "You thought someone in the family took it," I said slowly. "I didn't want to say it outright, not when you were hurting so badly. But yes, I had suspicions." Helen's mouth tightened. "There were people at the funeral I didn't recognize, friends of friends, people who claimed to know Laura but seemed more interested in looking around the house than paying respects." "But Emily was just a teenager then. She wouldn't have—" "Not Emily. But what about this Daniel? How long has she known him? Where did they meet?" I realized with a sinking heart that I didn't know those answers. Emily had been vague about their relationship timeline, always changing the subject when I asked about their early days together. "Michael, you need to be very careful here," Helen continued, her voice grave. "If you're right about what you saw last night, if Emily somehow has Laura's things, there are only a few explanations. None of them are good." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying either your daughter has been lying to you for years about having her mother's belongings, or someone gave them to her without telling her where they came from. Either way, confronting her directly could destroy your relationship forever if you're wrong, or put her in danger if you're right. Helen's words hit me like ice water. I'd been so focused on the mystery that I hadn't considered the larger implications. What do I do? Find the truth before you accuse anyone of anything. And Michael, she gripped my shoulder tightly, be prepared for the possibility that the truth might be worse than you think. Helen had given me Officer James Mulligan's number, scrolled on the back of a grocery receipt. He's retired now, she said, but he remembers everything. He was the one who took the report about the ring. I found him at Murphy's Diner on 3rd Street, exactly where Helen said he'd be every Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock. Mulligan looked older than his 65 years, his hair completely white now, but his eyes were still sharp and alert. He recognized me immediately. "Michael Carter. I wondered if I'd see you again someday." He gestured to the empty booth across from him. "Helen called, said you found something interesting." I slid Laura's ring across the Formica table. Mulligan picked it up, turning it toward the light, examining the inscription with the methodical attention I remembered from 10 years ago. "Definitely the same ring. I photographed this inscription for the report." He set it down carefully. "Where did you find it?" "My daughter's house, on her kitchen counter." "Like it belonged there?" Mulligan's eyebrows rose. "Emily. She would have been what, 16 when it went missing?" 17. Just started her senior year of high school." Mulligan pulled out a small notebook, the kind cops carried everywhere. "You know, I never liked how that case ended. Too many loose threads." "What do you mean?" "Well, we never found any evidence of a break-in, no signs of forced entry, nothing else missing from the house. Whoever took it either had access or was very, very careful." He paused, sipping his coffee. "But there was one thing, a tip that came in about a week after you filed the report." My pulse quickened. "What kind of tip?" "Anonymous caller said they saw someone matching Laura's ring at Morrison's pawn shop downtown. By the time I got there, Morrison claimed he'd never seen it. But—" Mulligan's eyes narrowed. "Morrison was nervous, sweating, wouldn't meet my eyes, and he had this nephew who worked there sometimes, helped him with estate sale acquisitions." "A nephew?" "Young guy, maybe early 20s, good-looking, charming. Morrison said he was reliable, had a knack for spotting valuable pieces at estate sales and garage sales." Mulligan flipped through his notebook. "Name was Reed. Daniel Reed." The coffee in my mouth turned bitter. I set down my cup with trembling fingers. "Daniel Reed worked at Morrison's pawn shop?" "For about 6 months, right around the time your wife's ring went missing. Then Morrison closed up shop suddenly, said he was retiring, but I always suspected there was more to it." Mulligan leaned forward. "Michael, this Daniel Reed, please tell me he's not the same Daniel Reed who's engaged to your daughter?" I couldn't speak. I could only nod. Mulligan's face darkened. "Son of a bitch! Excuse my language, but if this is what I think it is—" He closed his notebook with a snap. "Michael, you need to be very careful here. If Reed took that ring and somehow worked his way into Emily's life, this isn't just theft. This is something much more calculated." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this might not be a coincidence. And if Reed is willing to steal from a grieving widower, there's no telling what else he's capable of." The next 3 days passed in a blur of careful detective work. I called in sick to the insurance office, the first time I'd used a personal day for anything other than genuine illness, and set about learning everything I could about Daniel Reed. The Morrison's pawn shop connection was just the beginning. I drove downtown to the old location, now a trendy coffee shop called Grind. The owner, a young woman with purple hair and multiple piercings, had never heard of Morrison. But the elderly man at the barber shop next door remembered everything. "Old Morrison left town in a hurry," he told me while sweeping hair from around his chair. "One day he was there, next day the shop was cleaned out."
Rumor was he got mixed up with some stolen merchandise, but nothing was ever proved. What about his nephew, Daniel? The barber's eyes sharpened. Danny Reed? Haven't thought about him in years. Smooth talker, that one. Always dressed nice, drove a car too expensive for someone working part-time at a pawn shop. He paused his sweeping. Heard he got into the renovation business later. Probably doing well for himself. He always had an eye for valuable things. An eye for valuable things. Like Laura's wedding ring. I spent Tuesday afternoon at the public library, using their computer to search property records and business licenses. Daniel Reed Renovations had been incorporated 3 years ago, but before that, there were gaps in his employment history. No college records I could find, no previous addresses that led anywhere concrete.
Wednesday, I parked across from Emily's house and waited. Daniel left at 7:30 in his pickup truck, tool belts slung over his shoulder. I followed at a distance, expecting him to head to a job site. Instead, he drove to a small cafe on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where nobody asked questions. Through the window, I watched him sit across from an older man with graying hair and nervous eyes. Their conversation was intense, the older man gesturing emphatically while Daniel remained calm, occasionally nodding. Money changed hands. Not much, but enough to suggest this wasn't their first transaction. When the older man left, I got a clear look at his face. It was Morrison, the former pawn shop owner who'd supposedly retired and left town, was still here, still meeting secretly with Daniel Reed. I sat in my car for a long time after they'd both gone, pieces of a disturbing puzzle clicking into place. Daniel hadn't just worked at Morrison's pawn shop, he was still connected to the man who'd been nervous enough about Laura's ring to close his business and disappear. But the most chilling realization came as I drove home. If Daniel had been targeting valuable items from bereaved families 10 years ago, what were the chances that his relationship with Emily was genuine? What were the chances that he'd simply happened to fall in love with the daughter of a man he'd stolen from? The answer made my blood run cold. There were no coincidences this elaborate. Daniel Reed had found Emily on purpose. I chose neutral ground, a coffee shop near the community college where Daniel sometimes picked up supplies. I'd texted him that morning, asking if we could meet to discuss wedding plans. He'd agreed immediately, probably thinking it was the sign of acceptance he'd been waiting for. He arrived 5 minutes early, impeccably dressed in a clean flannel shirt and dark jeans. His smile was warm, practiced, as he slid into the booth across from me. "Mr. Carter, this is great. I've been hoping we could spend some time together, just the two of us." He signaled the waitress for coffee. "Emily talks about you all the time." "Does she?" I kept my voice level, friendly. "That's nice to hear. We've always been close. She really admires you, the way you handled everything after her mother died, raising her on your own. It couldn't have been easy." The mention of Laura sent a familiar pang through my chest, but I pushed it aside. No, it wasn't, especially right after the funeral. There were so many details to handle, so much confusion. Daniel nodded sympathetically. "I can imagine. People always say the first year's the hardest." Actually, some of the hardest parts came right away. Little things going missing, items that had sentimental value. I paused, studying his face. Laura's wedding ring disappeared just a few days after we buried her. If I hadn't been watching carefully, I might have missed it. The almost imperceptible tightening around his eyes, the slight pause before he responded. "That's terrible. Those kinds of losses must make the grief so much worse." "They do." I reached into my jacket pocket and placed Laura's ring on the table between us. The color drained from Daniel's face. For a moment, his mask slipped completely, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. Then, just as quickly, he recovered. That's wonderful that you found it. Emily must be so happy. Where was it all this time? That's what I'm hoping you can tell me, Daniel. I leaned forward, because according to a retired police officer I spoke to, this ring was spotted at Morrison's pawn shop about a week after it went missing, the same pawn shop where you worked. His coffee cup rattled against the saucer as he set it down. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly, how did my dead wife's wedding ring end up in my daughter's kitchen? Daniel's smooth confidence cracked. He ran a hand through his hair, glanced toward the exit, then back at me. Look, Mr. Carter, it's complicated. Uncomplicated. A long silence stretched between us. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. The ring was a gift to Emily from a family friend who thought she should have something of her mother's. What family friend? Someone who knew your family years ago. They asked me not to mention where it came from. They didn't want recognition. It was a weak lie, and we both knew it. I picked up the ring, holding it up to catch the light. Daniel, I know about Morrison's. I know you worked there when this ring disappeared. I know Morrison is still in town, still meeting with you. His eyes widened in genuine surprise. So let me ask you again, how did you get my wife's ring? Daniel's confession had been messy, fragmented, full of justifications that made my stomach turn. He'd taken the ring during the funeral reception, slipped into our bedroom while I was greeting mourners downstairs. Morrison had connections for selling high-end jewelry discreetly, no questions asked. But Daniel had kept the ring instead of selling it, drawn to its beauty, its history. I never meant it to hurt anyone, he had insisted, sweat beading on his forehead. And when I met Emily, when I realized who she was, I thought maybe it was fate, like the ring was supposed to come back to your family. Fate. As if stealing from a grieving widower was somehow destiny. Now I sat in my Honda outside Emily's house, gathering courage for what might be the most difficult conversation of my life. The ring felt impossibly heavy in my pocket, heavier even than the weight of what I had to tell my daughter. Emily answered the door with paint in her hair and a smile that reminded me achingly of Laura. "Dad, this is a nice surprise. I was just touching up the guest bedroom upstairs." "Can we talk, Em? It's important." Her smile faded at my tone. "Of course. Come in. Is everything okay?" We sat in her living room, surrounded by all the beautiful things that now seemed tainted with questions about their origin. I pulled out Laura's ring and placed it on the coffee table between us. Emily's reaction was immediate and devastating. Her face crumpled and she pressed her hands to her mouth. "Oh God, Dad, I can explain." "Can you?" I kept my voice gentle but firm. "Because I've spent the last week trying to understand how your mother's wedding ring, the one that disappeared after her funeral, ended up in your kitchen." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Daniel told me, he said he bought it at an estate sale, said it reminded him of something Mom would have worn. I thought it was such a thoughtful gift, such a beautiful coincidence." My heart broke watching her process the truth. "Emily, Daniel worked at Morrison's pawn shop when that ring disappeared. He took it from our house during Mom's funeral reception." "No," she shook her head violently. "No, that's not... Daniel wouldn't..." "I confronted him this afternoon. He admitted it." The silence stretched between us, broken only by Emily's quiet sobs. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red but clearer. "How long have you known?" "I suspected something when I found the ring last week. The investigation took a few days." "Investigation?" Her voice was small. "Emily, I had to know the truth. And there's more. The kitchen utensils, that photograph of your mother, probably other things. I think Daniel's been giving you stolen items for months, maybe years." She buried her face in her hands. "I feel so stupid, so blind."
You're not stupid, honey. Daniel is very good at what he does. This wasn't random. He targeted you specifically because you were Mom's daughter. She looked up sharply. What do you mean? I think he researched our family after he stole the ring, found out about you, engineered a way to meet you. The house, the engagement. Emily, I don't think any of it was real. You're saying he's been lying to me this whole time? That everything between us has been fake? I'm saying you deserve the truth before you marry him. And the truth is that Daniel Reed is not who he pretends to be. 3 weeks later, my phone rang on a Thursday evening. Emily's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment, my heart clenched with the familiar fear that had plagued me since our confrontation, that I'd lost my daughter along with her fiancé. Dad, can you come over? I have something for you. Her voice was steady, stronger than it had been in weeks. I drove across town through the same autumn streets where this had all begun, but everything looked different now. Cleaner, somehow, more honest. Emily met me at the door, and I was relieved to see color back in her cheeks. She led me to the living room where a small velvet box sat on the coffee table. I want you to have this back, she said, opening the box to reveal Laura's ring. It belongs with you. I picked up the ring, surprised by how right it felt in my palm after all these years. Emily, are you sure? Your mother would have wanted you to have it eventually. Not like this. Not through theft and lies. Her voice was firm. When the time is right, when I find someone who truly loves me, maybe then. But this ring deserves to be honored, not tainted.
She sat beside me on the couch, closer than she'd sat in years. I broke up with Daniel 2 days after you left, canceled the engagement, told him to get out of the house. How are you feeling about everything? Emily was quiet for a long moment. Grateful, she said finally. Grateful that you cared enough to find the truth, even when it was painful. Grateful that you didn't let me marry someone who saw me as a target instead of a person. I was terrified you'd hate me for interfering. I was angry at first, but not at you, at myself for being so blind. At Daniel, for using Mom's memory against me. She took a shaky breath. Dad, I'm sorry I pulled away from you these past few years. I thought I was becoming independent, but I was just isolating myself from the people who actually love me. The next day, I drove to Riverside Cemetery for the first time in months. Laura's headstone was weathered but well-maintained, surrounded by the seasonal flowers Emily had been leaving without telling me. I knelt in the grass and placed the ring on the stone for a moment, letting it catch the afternoon light. I found it, Laura, I whispered. And I found our daughter again, too. Then I slipped the ring back into my pocket, not to hide it, but to keep it safe until Emily was ready. Ready for love that was real, honest, and worthy of the legacy it represented. That evening, Emily called to invite me for dinner. Just the two of us, she said. I want to learn how to make Mom's chicken marsala properly this time. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.